So friends, how are you? I thought of today that we pass through error handling. First of all, what are the importance of knowing a certain coding language in deeper? What are some of the importances of understanding a certain coding language in deeper? Number one, understanding a certain coding language deeper, it helps you to write, number one, clean code. Number two, it pulls you from the realm of maybe a developer into the realms of an engineer. So it's very possible to use a complete framework like React, but you don't know how JavaScript really, you don't know JavaScript in deeper. So what is happening with modern frameworks is that modern frameworks have laid a lot of abstractions of the core language. And so you can be proficient in a certain framework, but you don't know the core language properly. So for that reason, I opted maybe in our force to dive deeper in understanding our coding stack well, I thought of maybe we look at error handling today. What is the importance of proper error handling? Proper error handling prevents a lot of errors such as application breaking, as we are going to see from the explanation today. So I usually tell people that the best way to understand something is you code as the explainer is explaining. So how do we do with that? So I'm using VS Code, then I'm using Node runtime environment. So with that said, I can say, let me create a directory. I call it error handling. And I cd error handling. Then I open with the VS Code. You can use any code editor. And with that, I can now see we have successfully opened the file. Then from that, I can maybe create index.txt. And from here, we can write what we are going maybe to explore. Number one is asynchronous errors. Asynchronous errors. Number one is synchronous. Number two is asynchronous errors. Number three is errors in callbacks, errors in promises, errors in callbacks, in callbacks. Then we have errors in async await, errors in async await. Then you can look at errors in async await. Then you can look global. You can check at global error handling. Then maybe you can look at something like custom errors. With that is said, I'm going to create a file and I'm going to call it synchronous.js. Here we are going to look at synchronous errors. And before I begin that, you can practically define what is synchronous. What do we understand with the word synchronous? So synchronous is it means execution follows a certain flow. Execution follows a certain flow. It's sequential. You can say it's sequential. So it's a sequential. So what happens is we move from one part, maybe part 1 to part 2, part 3, part 4. So this one is what typically means with synchronous errors. Maybe if I show a synchronous operation, you can maybe say console.log maybe console.log1, then I copy like that. I say 2, 3, 4, 5, and I say node synchronous. You see, this operation is following a certain sequence, a certain flow. That is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, we are looking at synchronous errors, handling errors at this. If I come up with the two statements and I say number 1, throw new error, and I say application crashed, then I say now console.log what? Application did not break. Then I can now say, now what is happening is very simple. This is not a proper way of handling errors, because number 1, what is happening is that this application is throwing an error. It's finding an error here, so it is throwing an error, and that throwing that error, it is causing the application to crash. This one is an example of a synchronous way of handling it, because the application follows a certain process, and that is first line, then second line. So there is this step 1 here, that is and comment. We have step 1, then we have step 2. There's a series of steps that are being followed. Step 1, step 2. So this application follows a particular kind of sequence, that is from step 1 to step 2. Now, if we now use the correct mechanism, we can now say, let's just leave those two statements there. I can just edit, I can just delete those two comments. Then I can say, I can comment these two. Then I can now say, try catch error. Then I'm going to say console.log. Let's say this error here, I can say draw new error. We are learning what? Learning errors. And I can now come and say, I can now say copy this application crashed, paste, we can just paste it there. Then I can say console.log, I can copy this statement, copy that statement and paste it here. Then I can uncomment it and I can run the application. So application did not break. What is happening is very simple. What is happening is we did not console log this. I can say error user, alert user, alert user. Then I can say error dot message, alert user error dot message. So this is you can say then run alert user, application crashed, application did not break. Alert user, we can say error found, error was found on login, error was found on login. Then you can just error, alert user, error was found on login. So what is typically happening, this application is flowing asynchronously, not asynchronously. It is following a certain kind of a flow. Then there's line number 8, 9, 10, then to line number 18. What is happening is very simple. This application is flowing from line execution from line number 8 to line number 18. So this one is synchronously. So it finds an error here, and instead of breaking this application, this error is being caught. It's being caught by this block, and it is being now consoled. The user is being alerted of a certain error that has happened. Now that is the power of proper error handling. you can look at this application did not break unlike this which broke, unlike that which broke. So this now comment that this did not break. This did not break. So that is proper error handling synchronously. So you can look at that. Maybe when you are doing forms validation, when maybe you are consuming a certain API, there is this kind of mechanisms. There are these kind of criteria you are supposed to be employing to make sure that user enjoys your application or your system simultaneously, properly. So if I do this, if I come here and say, if I look at our number 2 is asynchronous errors, I can say async.js. Let's just say async. This one is asynchronous errors. Asynchronous errors. This is asynchronous errors. Let us implement a simple asynchronous operation. Let's say set timeout. Then you can give it 1000 milliseconds. Then I can say draw new error, and this I'm going to say application crashed. So first of all, what is asynchronous operation? What is asynchronous operation? Maybe if you don't know, what is asynchronous operation? This is an operation that does not break the main execution thread. The main execution thread. So with this operation, which is asynchronous, task can run at the background while other tasks can run. This is typically an example of opposite. This one is the real opposite of synchronous operation, whereby applications can never, or maybe a certain piece of code or an operation cannot run at the background. It must follow a certain series of steps. Now in asynchronous operations, we are given the freedom to let our applications or our operations, some of them to run at the background while other operations are being carried out. Operations here, operations can run in the background, like that. Operations can run in the background. If we come and say, now, if we come and say console, if I come and say set timeout, we want this now. We want now this one to take 2000 milliseconds. In what essence? We want this one to be executed faster than this, quickly, fast than this. So what will happen if I say set timeout and I give out 2000 milliseconds? Then I say console.log application did not crash, like that. And I can now run, can say async node supposed to be node async. So what is happening? This application is flowing from line number 1 to line number 18. So when it reaches to line number 7, it finds out that this one is an asynchronous operation. So it takes it somewhere and it places it at call stack. And it says, now this application has to be executed after 1000 milliseconds. Now when it flows downwards, it finds that in line number 13, there is a certain application, there is a certain operation there. And this operation has to be executed after 2000 milliseconds. So what happens is this one is taken to the call stack. and it is now the program execution, it knows that this operation has to be executed after 2000 milliseconds. Now when it is waiting for 2000 milliseconds, there is this one which has to take 1000 milliseconds. Now before this one is executed, this one is executed first. Now there's a problem here. Before it executes this one, it finds out that there is an error. Okay, and instead of having, you see, we don't have a proper mechanism to catch this error. So what happens is this application breaks because there is no proper mechanisms to catch this error. If we say node async, so it is taking 1 second to run this. It's taking 1000 milliseconds to run this, and the application breaks because there is an error. If we say, if I copy that and I say try catch error, if we print that here and we say console.log, an error was found at the async operation, then I say error, then I say message, and you can say error dot message, like that. Like that. If I come here and say let's see, and I run, so an error was found at async operation. This error, application crashed. That is the error, and application did not crash. So what is happening is very simple. At the call stack, this one has to be executed after 1000 milliseconds, and this one after 2000 milliseconds. Now obviously this one will take place in the beginning. So unlike the beginning, it comes now when it's executing, it finds line number 9 try, then line number 13 catch. So it finds this error and it catches this error and it's been printed here. Then now application, then now the execution flow, it can now then go to the other operation which has 2000 milliseconds. So you can look at this. The way this thing is functioning. So it has first to execute this, then this, and this one has executed because the application has not crashed. And unlike we had this scenario, throw a new error, there was a authentication key, was not provided, and I can run it. Authentication key was not provided. Now this one is bad error handling. Because this operation cannot be executed because this one has an error which has not been caught. So it breaks the flow of the execution. So the correct way is to place that code inside a try catch block, like this, and everything can work. So after 1000 milliseconds, this line is printed. Then after 2000 milliseconds, this one is printed. So that was maybe a demonstration of how we properly handle errors in async operations. Then we can have maybe can check at errors in promises. Then I can say promises, can come up with a file, say promises.js. So errors in promises. How do we now go with this one? Let's say we have a certain promise here to fetch users. Const fetch users, and we say is equals to promise dot reject. users were not found, that way, and I say fetch users this way, fetch users that way, and I can now say node promises misses. Now type error, let's see type error, fetch users, fetch users, fetch users, fetch users. Fetch users is not a function. You can see there is a certain, this one is an error here. We are checking at errors in promises. So if we say now, so you can now see if I say console.log error properly caught, and I run, like clear everything, then run, this statement cannot be executed because there are no proper ways to handle this rejection. So what happens is we come up with the certain statement, we call it then what will happen, this one receives a callback, we say console.log data, console.log data. Then with that you can now say catch what error. Then you can now say console.log error. Can say, can alert the user, alert user. Then we can have a message, alert user, message, error.message, error.message. Then you can now execute everything. Fetch users. Fetch users is not a function. See, promise.error rejected. See, fetch users, then
hello. The matter is fine. Sawa. Ya, ushameka level.
let's return this.
Tuje kwanza. Baada nipige. Sawa.
Oh, it's supposed to be, I'd forgotten something. It's supposed to be, let me undo everything. It's supposed to be this one, supposed to be this one should turn it into a function like that, so that it can be properly executable like that. And forgotten that this one is a function. So if we run, so you can look at so everything is working correctly. So what was happening, maybe you can just edit, you can just clear everything. You can say const fetch users is equals to, this one is then you can say promise dot reject. Promise dot reject, you can say maybe authentication token was not provided like that. Then you can say fetch users. Then we have now the first statement which is called then after this promise. What is going to happen? Then get the data. Then what is going to happen? We are going now to return that data. After returning this data, we want to catch the error. So you say error, return what? Console.log. Console.log an error, alert user. And you can say message. What message can maybe say? And say message dot errors, message dot error. That way, then you can run. Message is not defined. It's supposed to be error dot message. Error dot message. Then I can now say can pull out this, say error. Can simply say error. See this error here, this rejection is now being caught. You see, and it is now being console log here. It is now being consoled. So alert user. We alert. Maybe we are saying. Maybe we are thinking of. Maybe you are dealing with something like front end. We are dealing with something like front end, and maybe something has happened with a certain promise. So we want to alert the user of something that has happened. So alert user message authentication token was not provided. So this fetch users. So this rejection is now being caught here, and the user is now being alert of something that has happened. So that's how generally we look at errors at promises. That's how generally you look at errors at promises. Maybe you can look at errors at maybe async await. Async await. You can come here and say, you can look at our file here. Errors in promises, errors in callbacks, errors in callbacks. Let us look at errors in callbacks. Can have a file, another file, call it callbacks.js. Then you can say import const fs const is equals to require fs. You just wanted to operate with some file, then you can say const path is equals to require path. Then you can say fs.read file. fs.read file. Let's say we want to read this file, index.txt. You can say path.join. Path.join directory name, then the file is called index.txt, like that. Then we can say we can have some data here. You can say error, and you can have data. So what will happen is very simple. You can say if there is an error, if there is an error, you say console.log error.message, because that one is an object.message. Then you can now say if there is no error, you can say control.log data. That way, the data that will be gotten. I can now run this, and it's named node callbacks. So we have this buffer statement, but we can now convert this one to string. Can say you can convert that one to string, maybe to know what is to string like that. To string, this one is a function to string. And with that we have our file here, this file. This is now this what this callback, this is demonstrating maybe a read operation to a certain file when that file is maybe available, so this is actually a read operation to a file that is available, so let's see something. Let's see so we can still remove this, and we can just say data. See again, can maybe see that you can maybe check on I can say callbacks. Can maybe cd like that and say not callbacks. So with that I can say then with that I can say instead of using dot to string function, I can say UTF-8 like that. I can now see, so this UTF-8 is a certain kind of encoding. So I can now come here and say what? Can now come here and say what if this file does not exist? Let me add something like an X there for a file that does not exist. If I run it, node index, node callbacks, so environment, no such file or directory. So if I come here and say console.log, maybe the application did not break. And I run at it again, the application did not break. Let's see, let me execute this system. Let's say set timeout. Can come here and say give it something like 2 seconds, like 2000 milliseconds. Say console.log, the application did not break. See, the application did not break, no such file or directory. See, let's so that's one way of entering this error properly. But you see, if if I remove this, let's just remove this. No such file or directory. Open. Now this is one way of maybe entering errors when we are dealing with callbacks. You get the error, then you console.log here. But we can, this also can also be said, you can also try this. You can say try catch error. Try catch error. Then we say, we copy this, copy that, we say copy that, then we remove this, Then we remove this. Let's say try that. Then I say console.log that error. Let's see the outcome of this. If I run undefined. So generally when we are dealing with the file operations, this is the best way to handle errors. If error console.log error, maybe we are alerting the user. We say user, then we give him something like a message, then we say error dot message, then we say after that say else we say console.log data. That way run again, anoint. So this is proper way of handling that error, a proper way of handling the errors. Okay, maybe if we look at something like look at index.txt, look at something like, so we have looked at callbacks. You can look at something like async await. You can look at something like async await. So I can maybe say async, then async await.js. Then I can say maybe we want to fetch some data, const fetch users. Const fetch users, let it be an async operation. Then you say const fetch users. How do we handle errors when we are dealing with async await operations? Const fetch users. We have a statement here. We say const response is equals to, maybe we want to fetch certain users there. Maybe we want to come here and pull some users from JSON placeholder. Then we say fetch users from this URL, that way. Then with this, of course this one is a promise, so you have to await it. How do we do this kind of error handling? So what happens is very simple. We copy this statement and we place it in a try catch block. We try catch. Then we say console.log console.error. Then you say error.message. Then we say, here we give it that statement, then it's the const data is equals to await response dot data, that way. Then you say we can maybe say const data is equals to await response dot data. That then you can say console dot log data, that way. Then you can now call the API fetch users this way. Then with that we can now run this. We can say node async await, so undefined. This is supposed to be response.json. So if we run fetch field, let's see, fetch users async response, let's see, try fetch. see. Let's see. Fetch field. Sync. Let's see. Await. Fetch. Const response. Let's see whether the data is okay. Let's see whether it's let's copy it. See response console dot, can say const data is equals to response dot JSON. Then you can now say console can say return data. Then you can say console.log fetch users, and you can now run it. Promise pending. Then I can say const data is equals to await. I can now run it. Promise pending. Await, async await. Then I can say I can remove this console.log. Can say can fetch users. Can say console.log data. Well, it's like that. I don't know why it was they had problems with the fetching. I basically don't know why. Basically don't know why it had fetch problems. So that's how it is. Like if I remove, but that's basically that thing that brought fetch field. It demonstrated how you catch errors. If I remove something like s there, if I say that I remove something like an s, I say like this, we clear everything. Maybe if we want to see it properly, can remove everything there, can add and say console.log table like that. If I run it, so nothing is happening. Nothing is totally happening. If I remove this and I say, if I remove this t, I run it again. So nothing is happening. If I can just return to log. So nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. So what happens is I can come here and say if response dot okay. If response is not equal to okay dot okay, can say if response is not equal to okay, can now throw new error. Can say errors with the network detected, like that. Errors with the network detected. Then I can now run it again. Errors with the network detected. So what is happening is that we have disoriented this API, so it's not bringing 200 success code. So response.okay, it's not response.okay. So we are bringing that error. If we come here and say this, we want this to happen, then we come here and say set timeout. I can say set timeout maybe after 2000 milliseconds, I can say console. The application is flowing like that. I run it. Error detected. You can look at this code. This one is a proper way of handling errors because the code is properly being executed, and this block here is properly being printed without the code blocking, without the code breaking. So that's the way we deal with async operations. I don't know why my API was not connecting to the internet. I don't know, the problem was with network or what. So if I can return that and run it again, so you can see the data is now being printed. Let's see console.log table. Convert it into a table. You can say, can now clear everything there and say, so everything is working totally. So that's how we properly handle errors in async operations like that. So I can maybe check at this global error handling. Global error handling. Global error handling. Global error handling. How do we handle this? Global error handling. So let's say can maybe come up with a file called global.js. We say in this file there's a promise here said let's say a certain developer left a code which he never handled it properly. You can say main const fetch users is equals to, this one is an arrow function, promise dot reject no users. You see, if we clear this and say and we run this code here, we say node global, then I call this, I say fetch users like that. So this node global, this fetch users here, this node global, it's triggering this. And you see, if I come and say console.log application flowing, and I run it again, this code cannot be executed. Because this error is not properly entered. So how do we do that? Maybe this developer forgot to do this proper error handling. So how do we do that? So we say process. We say process. Let's see process.on. You say unhandled rejection. So this rejection, maybe this developer forgot. Maybe he wants to come up with a mechanism through which he can handle any error which he forgot in the application. Unhandled rejection. Then you can say unhandled rejection. This will receive unhandled rejection. This will receive reason. Will receive parameters called reason and a promise. Reason and promise like that. Reason and promise. Then you can now say console.log unhandled, can say unhandled rejection. Then you can now give out the reason. This. Then with this, we can now come here and bring it here. Can now say run. So what has happened is very simple. We can now come up with this kind of code whereby if this developer forgot handling the rejections properly, there is this global mechanism through which that error can be properly handled. So you can come up with this process.on.undo rejection, which takes two parameters, reason and promise. Then we can now say, we can now bring our code there. Can now say, maybe say, let's remove that. We can say then data console.log data, then you can say now catch error, can now say console.log, let's say error found, then you can now say error like that. Then I can now run it. Errors, no users found. Error found, no user found. So if I come and say, if I say fetch users there, and I come and say what? I uncomment that and I come and say console.log users, the code is continuously executing. Code is continuously executing, then I run. Code is continuously executing and under rejection or users. So this is properly working. You can maybe come and copy that, say set timeout. We give something like 2000 milliseconds. Then I can say that one, we want that one to be executed. And under rejection or users, the code is continuously executing. So that's how that thing is handled. Maybe you forgot, if maybe the developer forgot a rejection, to handle a certain rejection. So that one can properly be handled like that. There can also be a certain scenario. If I comment this and comment this, there is also a certain scenario whereby the developer can forget to handle a certain exception. So you can say process.on unhandled exception. Then you can say this can be an error. Then if that error, if the process.unhandled exception, if this developer does not undo a certain exception, there can be an error. There can be an error. So how do we undo that error? We say console.log error, console.log error. You say error there, console.log error occurred. Then you can now return that error. You can say error dot message. Then you can now say there is an error dot message. You can now safely terminate the process. Can now say process dot exit 1, process dot exit 1. Then we can now come here and bring a certain error. Just bring a certain error, and you say throw new error properly, system properly terminated, system properly terminated like that. Then I can bring this here, and I can say maybe set timeout what? I can say an unhandled exception. Set timeout, say give it something like 1000 milliseconds, and I can say console.log application still flowing, application still flowing. Can now run this. Error occurred, system terminated. So what is happening, if I come and remove this, let's say, let me remove this code here and run this without that, what is happening, say node global. So this system is terminating because there is a certain error here. There is a certain error here which has not been properly handled. And this cannot be executed because of this error. Because of this error. But now what happened is very simple. When you introduced this code block, this code block is there to trace any exception which was never handled. And so when it finds that exception, it console.log that exception, and it safely exits the process. It safely exits the process. Now, there's a difference between this process.exit and this. You can also say return what? Return error. Can say return error can say error dot message. You can simply say return error dot message. But this one is highly encouraged. This one is highly encouraged because, but for this scenario you are going, I may have a separate video explaining how these two works. But for this scenario, you can work with this. You can work with this. The main danger of this, it's very simple. This one, it halts the process, the execution threads, and in most situations, it does not allow proper cleanup. So with that is set. Maybe you can look at the last one, which is custom errors. Custom errors. Can come up with somewhere something, say custom errors, say custom.js. You come up with that custom file. Let's say we want to undo a certain error. Say const class, we define a certain class not found error. Not found error. Then this one will inherit error class. That. Then with that we have our constructor. We have our constructor there. Then with this constructor we have something like with that constructor we have something like name. Super, you can come up with we have a super there, name. Can come up there with the name. Then we have error constructor, message. Can come there. Can have somewhere like have a name. Can call this name is equals to not found. Let's say not found, then message, say not found error, like that, not found error. Or maybe I can come up with more separate video explaining this, how it works, maybe explaining how these classes, this inheritance, these objects, can maybe come up with separate thing, because I've come to realize that this will encompass that. It will encompass inheritance, it will encompass using objects. So maybe I can come up with a separate video explaining how this entire thing works. Maybe you can just reach there for today. When maybe we are explaining how classes, how inheritance works, we can explain that. So if that one is set, understanding how this one works is it's good for when you are building anything that you want the thing to last, and you want the thing that is not boring to users. So these are the major things. We have synchronous, we have asynchronous, we have errors in promises, errors in callbacks, errors in async await. Then we have global error handling. So with that one set, you can maybe subscribe for more explanation on this, and for more things, maybe to enlighten each other. Thank you. You can have a nice day.